When the sun goes to sleep and the moon says hi, when the day is done and the night is nigh, the stars like to listen to a special friend. It's bedtime stories with Uncle Glenn.
Hi everybody, welcome to Bedtime Stories with Uncle Glenn. Tonight we have a pretty long story, so we're going to be really quick with our happy thinking thought. I'm all ready, Mr. Monster's all ready. Let's close our eyes, smile, and think of our happy thinking thought, which is our story. So let's get our story out from our story time book. Our story tonight is called The New Monster. The class was excited. Mrs. Indy, their teacher, had just announced there would be a new student joining them the next day. Everyone wanted to know what the new student was like. Our new student is a girl, and her name is Rose, Mrs. Indy started, and she's not an animal. Mrs. Indy paused. She's a monster with lovely bright pink fur. That'll make two monsters in our class, Rose and Sunshine. Cool, Whitey Wolf exclaimed. Everyone turned to look at Sunshine and see his reaction. And just then, the recess bell rang and they all went out to the playground. Immediately, all the kids started asking Sunshine questions. Do you know her? Bully asked. No, Sunshine replied. Oh, come on, sneered Meanie Monkey. You're both monsters, you must know her. Yeah, said Darlene. Don't all monsters know each other? Sunshine thought that was a pretty silly thing to say, but before he could reply, Meanie spoke up again. Sunshine's probably just afraid we'll like her better than him. After all, Mrs. Indy never said he had lovely fur when she told us he was coming to Woodsville. Sunshine was surprised and hurt by the comments. Many questions raced through his head and frustrated him. How could he expect it to be and know every monster? Why would his friends think he would keep it a secret if he knew Rose? Why didn't Mrs. Indy say something nice about him before he came? Feeling very confused, Sunshine turned to everyone and said, I don't know her, but all I know is that pink monsters become very dangerous if they get upset. Not like us yellow ones. With that, he stormed off and left everyone standing shocked on the playground. I guess we'd better be careful around the new girl, Bully said thoughtfully. Yeah, we don't want to get hurt if she gets upset, Darlene replied. Over at the swings, Sunshine felt awful. He knew what he had said about pink monsters wasn't true. They were no more dangerous than any other monster. He was just so frustrated that he wanted to get away from all the questions. As Whitey came over to him, Sunshine let out a big sigh. I'm sorry we asked you so many questions, Whitey Wolf said. It's just that we don't know any other monsters, and we were curious. Whitey sat down on the swing beside Sunshine. That's okay, said Sunshine. Look, you know what I said about pink monsters? He paused. Sure do, Whitey replied. Just as Sunshine was about to tell him the truth, the bell rang and Whitey jumped off his swing and ran towards the school. I'll be sure to tell the rest of the class, he hollered over his shoulder, and soon he was far ahead. Sunshine sighed again. That's the last thing he wanted. For the rest of the day, Sunshine tried to tell Whitey the truth, but every time he would get interrupted. Once, he even got in trouble for trying to talk. That had never happened before, and made Sunshine feel even worse. The next morning, Sunshine planned to tell Whitey on the bus ride to school, but Sunshine's momster had an appointment, and she said she would drive Sunshine to school. Sunshine got to school just in time to go in and didn't have any time to tell Whitey that pink monsters were not dangerous when they got upset. When everyone settled into class, Mrs. Indy brought a very shy-looking pink monster in from the hall and introduced her. Class, please welcome our new student, Rose Ridley. Rose, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Mrs. Indy said. Rose looked very scared. Sunshine remembered how nervous he was on his first day at Woodsville when he was asked to talk about himself. Hi, I'm Rose. I come from Fernship, and I'm a good monster. That's not what we've heard, Meanie Monkey whispered to the kids around him. They all laughed quietly, and the laughing seemed to make Rose even more nervous. Rose closed her eyes for a moment, opened them, and continued. I like dancing, basketball, and doing unusual things, she said. Like hurting people when you're angry, Meanie whispered, and once again there was laughter at the back of the classroom. Meanie Monkey, is there a problem? Mrs. Indy scolded. Straightening up, Meanie Monkey replied, No, Mrs. Indy, and then turned to his friends and added slyly, Not yet. They all snickered, but Mrs. Indy didn't seem to hear him as she turned back to Rose. Rose, it's a pleasure to have you at Woodsville. Why don't you go and have a seat over there beside Darlene? Darlene dear froze and looked frightened. Is there a problem, Darlene? Mrs. Indy asked. No, not at all, Darlene said shakily. Great. Now, class, take out your math books and turn to chapter 14. Rose made her way over to sit beside Darlene. When she sat down and smiled shyly at Darlene, Darlene gave a little smile back and turned away from her quickly, looking very frightened. Sunshine felt horrible. He knew that Rose felt as scared as he had on his first day, and he had made it worse for her with his lie. He was ashamed of himself. The class was very quiet all through math. When Rose was called upon to answer a question and she got it wrong, everyone stared at her. Some of the students even ducked a little. Clearly, this reaction made Rose even more uncomfortable, and Sunshine felt really bad for her. When recess came, no one offered to play with Rose. They were all too scared of her and how she might react if she lost a game and got upset. Sunshine found Rose at the far end of the playground, sitting by herself. Hi, I'm Sunshine, Sunshine said. Hi, Rose replied, but didn't say anything else. I'm glad you're here, Sunshine tried to smile, but inside he felt awful. I think you're the only one, Rose said, and she started to cry. I'm sorry, I just don't know what I did wrong. Everyone hates me. They don't hate you, Sunshine said. They're just, afraid of you. Afraid of me? Why? Rose asked. Sunshine bit his lip. He paused for a long moment and was about to speak when Rose added, Are you afraid of me? No, of course not. It's just that, Sunshine started, but Rose cut in. It's just that I'm not as pretty a monster as you are, and everyone hates me. Rose cried even harder and ran into the school, leaving Sunshine alone. The recess bell rang and all the students raced back to class. Sunshine didn't know what to do. He felt so bad for Rose, but didn't know how to make things better. When the class settled down, Mrs. Indy started teaching. I hope you all had a good recess, she said. Sunshine looked at Rose, who looked terrible from crying. Suddenly, he stood up and said, Mrs. Indy, I lied. Mrs. Indy looked confused. What did you say, Sunshine? Sunshine took a deep breath. I lied to the class. I was frustrated with the questions they were asking me about monsters, and I suppose I was a bit jealous about the new monster coming into our class, so I lied. Sunshine turned to Rose and talked to her directly. Rose, I told the class yesterday that monsters with pink fur get dangerous when they're upset. I didn't mean it, and I tried to tell everyone, especially my best friend Whitey, but I kept getting cut off. That's why everyone is treating you so badly. It's because of me. I'm so sorry. Sunshine stood there while the class just stared at him. Then they looked at Rose. Rose didn't say anything for a moment. When she stood up, a few students gasped. They still expected her to be dangerous. Rose walked over to Sunshine and looked him in the eyes. Then she said, I can tell that you're really sorry, and I forgive you. Thank you for being honest. She reached out her hand and asked, Friends? Sunshine smiled and said, Friends, and the class cheered. For the rest of the morning, Mrs. Indy let the class ask Sunshine and Rose more questions about monsters, and they all learned that pink monsters are just as nice and friendly as any other colored monster. Sunshine had also learned a valuable lesson. As he left for lunchtime with Whitey, he turned to him and said, I'm sorry for lying. I will never do it again. Whitey smiled and replied back, That's okay, Sunshine, and I'll try to listen better next time. Together they joined the class in the lunchroom, where they all watched Rose show off her dancing skills to her new friends at Woodsville School. The end. That was a great story, long story, but a good lesson about not lying, because it can hurt you and others. Mr. Monster loves the story too, and Uncle Glenn loves the story as well. So I hope you enjoyed it, because we really did.